Today I want to talk about Eastern versus Western traditions. So in the Old Testament, we will consider this our Eastern point of view, and we would be our Western understanding in what we would maybe consider New World. I talked a little about this a few weeks ago, which I'm sure none of you were there for, but the class at Outreach talked a little bit about this understanding and didn't really get into the good stuff. I've found some really good stuff in podcasts and books and other resources that I have enjoyed, and it has changed my view on Scripture and changed my understanding on how I read and just understand Western or Eastern culture in my Western eyes. One story I didn't tell that I meant to in class at Outreach was this story of a minister in, I believe, the Philippines or some other country, and this couple were entering into a congregation and were fellowshipping and getting to know these people. They actually left another church because of an issue that happened there, and they came and they were starting to become part of this church and part of the congregation. And this pastor missionary came to this church, and they came to him and they were like, "Hey, we have this new couple that's coming in, but we want them to be part of the congregation, but they have this egregious sin, this horrible sin that they cannot, that they pretty much ran from, and we don't know if we can have them enter and fellowship with us. We don't know if that's okay. We don't." And he was like, "Well, you're gonna have to tell me what this sin was." And they almost didn't want to tell him because it was so bad. But come to find out, this couple went and got married without their family. So they eloped. Such a horrible sin, right? We would think of that as somewhat normal in our culture. But for them, their culture is so family-based that if you do something outside of your family, it is like the worst thing you could ever do. So I want to help us understand these different viewpoints and not to change Scripture, although we should understand how it was originally written and what it was originally intended for. So like I kind of alluded to, this isn't my study. I've just found some things through podcasts and other books, and I'll mention those resources at the end, and we can talk about those afterwards. And for the YouTube video, I'll just put those links in the description of that video. So, to start out, a big difference in culture is how we view marriage. So we have these two cultures, one being of the Eastern view. Is that what that says? Yeah. And then one being of the Western view, and then the Bible, we can say, we read it in the Western, but took place in the Eastern. So we have to understand both. It's right in the middle there. We would view Eastern marriages as somebody who, like a parent, picks a wife for their son or picks a husband for their daughter. And you have no say in it, right? And they choose and you just go along with it. And for us in the Western world, we would choose and we would maybe date or we would court our significant other before we decide to get married on our own and then involve our parents in that decision, but ultimately it's our decision. In Bible time, I don't really know how it is in every culture, but in Bible time, from what I've researched, it seems it was not fully just the parents. The people that were actually getting married did have a say in it. It was just the parents who kind of did most of the work, I guess, and pushed it along. But in these biblical marriages, a little different than what this picture shows, but it's still a good example. Biblical marriages, they would have so much family ties that they would actually live together with their extended family, so cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents and everything. They would live in the same house and not like literally with the same rooms. They would have this house that is called a Beit Av, or a father, which translates, I believe, to our Father's house. And this is what I found a really bad picture. Oh my goodness, it's even worse when it's on a projector. This is what a Beit Av would look like, with possibly multiple stories. I don't even know. And they would add on these separate rooms and add on other quarters for different parts of the family. But you would all live, it's called a mishpacha, I believe is how you pronounce it. And that would be your extended family. So that extended family would get together, and they would get together. So that's Beidov. And then your mishpacha is your extended family, grandparents and cousins and everything. They would get together, have like a big family meeting about for example, about the bachelor that is possible to get married. Really weird for us, right? And they would talk about who the candidates are that could marry this person. Obviously, this person has a say in, like, they could suggest, hey, I'm looking at this person. They'll put it in the suggestion box. But then once they decide on somebody, there would be a betrothal period, an engagement. And the father of the groom will come to the groom and hand him a cup of wine. And they will go to the bride-to-be's mishpacha, and they would give this cup, the groom-to-be would give this cup of wine to who he wants to marry, the bride-to-be, and he would say something to the effects of, this cup is a new covenant. I will not drink of this cup until I drink it anew in my Father's house. He will say that to his new wife, that I will not drink of this cup until I enter anew into your Father's house. Or into my Father's house, sorry. And then she would say yes or no. It seems like most of the time they would say yes because so much got into this process that by the time they get to this point, they're bound to say yes. After she would say yes, they would go back, the father of the groom and the groom would go back to their mishpacha, their Beidov, and they would build on to their Beidov a living quarter, a house for the future family. And building on to this, it would be the groom that would be doing the work, usually. The father is involved. He could say the exact steps of what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, of building this house. He could say, you do whatever you want, you build it, and I'll tell you when it's correct. And then he could come in at the last and say, no, this isn't right, tear it all down, we got to start over. But ultimately, it's the father's decision. When the father says it's done, then it's time for it to be done. Meanwhile, the bride is still back at her Beidov, her family, and she is just waiting. She has to just wait for him to finish building the house. But once the father says it's done, it's done. So it doesn't matter when that is. He could say it in the middle of the night that, okay, this looks good. The house is done. So nobody but the father knows when they're going to be done. They don't know the day or the hour when the father will be done, or when the house will be done, and the father only knows when they can go and get the bride. But when it is, they will go and get the bride. The bride will be ready, and she will be consecrated. And there's a ritual for that. And once she is consecrated, there will be a trumpet that is sound, and the whole community will gather together for this wedding. They will gather under this huppah, which is the picture that I showed at the very beginning. And I think, in the Chosen, they build a huppah for the wedding. And this is one of the scenes. I guess in the Chosen, they had a very bad option of a huppah. So they kind of just did what they could with it. Here's another example that you can see in the background. It's basically just a canopy over where the wedding would take place. And this canopy, or this curtains to say, would represent the presence of God over the wedding, condoning this. Okay, so after they are under the huppah, they will share their vows, or the ketubah. Is that how? Ketubah? And this is 8, 10, 12 things that they would share together to seal the marriage and say, this is basically an agreement. This is how this marriage is going to go. But then there will be a multiple day party and some gifts, and then finally a honeymoon area scene that they will just stay together. Typical honeymoon. Okay, so this is the Eastern or even biblical weddings that we don't really understand, or if maybe it's just all weird or some of it is weird. To dig into the scriptures a little bit more, we're going to look at Exodus 19 and how Exodus 19 compares to an Eastern wedding. So there needs to be a little bit of backstory, I guess. Backstory to Exodus 19, pretty much the whole Bible before that. Abraham has a covenant with God, and God promises him. We know that story. There is then a time in Egypt where it seems that the Israelites have been in Egypt, enslaved in Egypt, and captives, and they have no way of help. It seems like God is nowhere. It seems like God has abandoned them. He's left. Where is he? And then there is an arrival of God when Moses comes and he frees them. So that would be God coming back and freeing them, obviously. Moses is then told in verse 10 of Exodus 19, if you look at Exodus 19 in verse 10, Moses is told to consecrate Israel, to prepare them. And then we go down to verse 16, and I'm summarizing Exodus 19 very simply. But if you read this, hopefully you can follow along what I'm going through. Exodus 19, verse 16 says that there is a trumpet that is sounded. And then in verse 17, they gather under the mountain where God is at the top of this mountain. His presence is at the top of this mountain with soon to be Moses. And then God presents eventually the 10 commandments or 10 agreements to the children of Israel. And then they are given the law of Leviticus. And then lastly, they wander in the wilderness for 40 years. So chapter 20 is the 10 commandments, and then Leviticus, and then the rest of the story. We know that. So what does this have to do with marriage? Well, this is a marriage. So if we think back to our Eastern marriages with our 9 steps, and then compare them to our Israelite marriage in Exodus 19, we can see side by side Abrahamic covenant. There's a betrothal, whatever that word is, a proposal, which is the covenant God gives them. The groom leaves. God leaves in Egypt. It seems like there's no hope. And then the groom comes back. Moses comes. God rescues them. The bride is consecrated. Israel is consecrated. It says in verse 10 that Moses is told to consecrate them. A trumpet sounded, or a shofar. They gather under the huppah. They gather under this mountain with the presence of God literally on top. It's not a huppah with the presence of God represented in the huppah. It is literally the presence of God on the top of the mountain. They have their ketubah, or their vows, or their agreements, and the Israelites have the 10 commandments they agree upon. They exchange gifts and have a honeymoon period with the law and time with God in their 40 years in the wilderness. So this is the Eastern way and how we can understand it a little bit differently. And I find it absolutely fascinating that there's so much more if you just study Jewish culture, Jewish tradition. I'm not saying the Bible is only for Jews. It's not only for us. But like that first picture I showed you, we have to know both sides to fully understand. And we can get the picture. We can get the picture of Jesus. We can get the picture of the Old Testament. But it just brings so much more into our minds when we know all the sides of it. And I hope you find enjoyment in it like I do.